In-ear rack part 2. This one is not going to be under $6,500. We're stepping it up in multiple different areas on this rack. Before we get into the build, I want to answer a few questions from the last video, just kind of explaining why we have certain things, why they're a certain way, and how some of those things are about to change. So one thing that I got a lot is why have the Motu and the Presonus if they can both act as interfaces. Now for us, and I would encourage you to do the same thing, it's very important for us to have a lot of content for social media because we do a lot on social media. So for us, I like having the Presonus to be able to function as the brain as far as running the different mixes, but I also like to use it as the interface to go to Pro Tools where we usually live track our shows to create content with the live audio. To me, that's just something extra special, but social media matters a lot to me, to our band, so it's important for me that we do that. So because of that, then the Motu is doing its own thing with Ableton. When I separate out the two interfaces, I'm running Pro Tools at the slowest possible buffer rate so I can run the Motu at a much faster rate so it keeps up and works with our live performance. But at the same time, I'm able to capture the live audio without getting any crashes. And honestly, I've been doing it that way for years and I've never had a crash. I don't think so. I'm also running a MacBook Pro that's not the base, but a little bit better than that. But honestly, I've done it on a MacBook Air. It's just about making sure your computer is optimized to do something like that. The second question I got a lot is, what if I want to do more mixes? That's part of what we're doing today. As you see up top, we've got another IEM box, we've got an antenna, and then we're upgrading the split snake. Now, I know I said in the last video that the seismic stuff is fine, and it is. The problem with this one particularly is I've had this for at least 10 years. I actually think I bought it in 2013. I can't remember, but I've had it for a really long time. And there is bad channels in it that I found after the video came out. It's not that it's just completely not worth it to redo it and go inside and fix that thing. But there's another reason that I really wanted to do the BTPA splitter. Most of my band lives in North Carolina. I live in Nashville. So anytime we do anything, we have to meet up in some form or fashion, whether it's here or there. It's usually me flying there because I'm one person and they're all over there. So weight matters a ton. And being able to take this like chunk of the W2 out, where in the seismic we had all the bulk snake just buried in the back of this. Being able to separate that out and put it in a different case will definitely help bring the weight down, which is insanely important when you're flying with racks like this. So that's honestly kind of the main reason I went to the BTPA, but there was just channels wrong here. This is a better unit. This is fine, but this is definitely a much better, much more professional unit. And that's kind of the main goal, updating the rack this time. We're going for a little less budget, but a little more pro, just based off a lot of the festivals and tours and stuff that we have. I want to be ready for kind of anything, and I want to be there with the best gear I can to kind of fit any scenario that we might run into. So here's our plan this time. What we're going to do is we're going to take this out. We're going to move this down. We're going to add these units in, and then I'm going to connect this one and this one, and then I'm going to run the Motu beside the antenna above it, and then we're going to put a little pass-through right above the Presonus to like have all the cables from this feed through. You see how this time, you know, we just jammed them in there. It's in the way, which people commented. I know it's in the way of that. It wasn't really a big deal, but this one sometimes I had a hard time syncing. So let's go ahead and eliminate that. And this round, we're going to put the split snake on the back of the rack. And to help us do all that, my friend Rob, who is an RF tech, Rob is very good at what he does, and he loves to build racks just like I do. So he's going to join us and help us put this rack together. Okay, so we're here with my friend Rob. Rob, tell people what you do.
I'm an audio engineer and I've been on the road touring as a monitor engineer and RF coordinator for the last 7 years, I guess. Currently working with an artist named Russell Dickerson. I've been out with artists like Charlie Puth, Lauren Lana, Lauren Spencer Smith, a bunch of others doing various things, mixing or coordinating wireless or patch tech, whatever, kind of do whatever, anything in the audio space. And I run a small business on the side, building racks like playback rigs, pedal boards, any manner of cables, and IEM rigs.
So it was important for us as Witsit to really get our rig together this year. Like I said, we got a lot of great size shows coming up, and I wanted to be as professional as possible. And no one better to help me than Rob. Rob, as far as like travel rigs go, is this best it gets for being this small?
For it all being in one package, yeah. I think it's pretty solid for what it does. I mean, you obviously only have 16 inputs, so as long as your input list is under 16 inputs and under 8 outputs, this is pretty solid. A lot of the rigs that I put together are in 2 rack formats, so you do the mixer in one rack and then the wireless in the other. But then you're obviously traveling with 2 different racks. Yeah, they're probably both going to be under, the overweight charge, under 70 pounds. But you're traveling with more than one item at a time, and you have to deal with the interconnect between the two. So as far as like getting things up and running really fast at a show, and keeping it all in one package, this is pretty solid for the input list, basically.
One thing that you probably hear us talk about a lot is weight, and why weight matters. I've said before that I live in Nashville, the rest of my band lives in North Carolina, so I have to fly to them a lot. But the bigger you kind of get in things, flying is more common.
Yeah.
The other thing is just, you've got stagehands and people that help you on and off. Kind of being weight conscious for someone else's benefit is a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
Not
a requirement.
Yeah. You don't want 200-pound racks if you don't have to. Kind of a small thing with the weight. Most airline carriers are 50 pounds and under. For American, Delta, I'm assuming United and companies like that, they're all 70 for first class. With a rack like this, the overages are probably going to be $100 either way. For Americans specifically, I found that it's cheaper or the same price to just buy a first class ticket. You get this for free and you get a better seat. Right. And I always rather would sit in that seat anyways. Right. For the small amount of times that we even have to do this, it's worth it to just spend the extra money or points or whatever to just fly first class, and then you get this bag there for free.
Yeah.
And you get a better seat.
If you have to fly, yeah.
If you have to fly.
Yeah. Some of the rigs that I've been building, like the M32 rigs, there'll be like an M32C and a DL32 in one rack. That's still going to be over 50 pounds, just the two of those together.
Sure.
Granted, you get 32 inputs and 16 outputs of analog straight off of the rack. But they usually come around like 65, 67 pounds. Your wireless rack ends up being under because it's around like 30 or so.
Yeah.
But you're still paying overage on one, so you might as well just put it all in one rack. If you don't need the I/O count.
Yeah, of course.
And then just have one overage charge in one bag than having to deal with 2 bags and one overage charge.
And honestly, if you're doing this and you need slightly more channels, we're using this pass-through. Am I on it? Yeah, we're using this pass-through this time just to kind of fill up the space because we bought this 6 space before. But PreSonus actually makes a 24 rack mount mixer that you can do in 2 spaces. You can get a few extra channels out of. And you're just a weight thing there, but as far as like space on the rack, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
And it has, I want to say it's 12 outs.
Oh, that's great.
Don't quote me on that.
Yeah, it's like right in between, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, at that point, if you were going to do them in 2 separate racks, they would both be underweight if you're going to do the PreSonus like style rig.
Oh,
so
yeah.
You could do that in a 3 space.
Sure.
And the wireless in a 3 space. And I would always recommend doing your playback system in with your mixer rather than with your wireless.
Yeah.
There's just more interconnect stuff you have to deal with. Just kind of how you want to do it, what do you want to spend on connectors. But this Mode 2 is really great for the amount of I/O that it has and the amount of space it takes up. Yeah, this is really solid.
As far as the playback stuff goes, we'd only recommend something like this or the Play Audio 12. If you're needing to be the half space.
Yeah, probably the half space. If you need more outputs and you want full redundancy in the same box, which the Play Audio 12 does do full redundancy other than power. The Play Audio 1U that came out this year is really awesome. But it is one full rack space. But that is kind of the gold standard for analog playback or analog interfaces for playback now is the Play Audio stuff, the iConnectivity series.
Sure.
But there's a lot of different options on the market now. I mean, you can do it with an Apollo, you can do it with the Scarlett. Like, they all work the same.
Oh, yeah.
It's just a matter of, like, what I/O count you want, what sample rate you're running it at, things like that.
Yeah. And there's a lot of guys that use Apollos in their rack for various things, whether it's...
Yeah, like live auto-tune. That's kind of the way to do it. If you're going to do live auto-tune, like, Apollo is the cheapest way to do it. And you could do playback from the same interface, depending on how many outputs you need. Like, an X4 will do playback and do tuning in the same interface.
Right.
So it just depends on how you want to interconnect it. And you have to worry about latency and all that kind of stuff, obviously. But the universal audio's protocol is pretty low latency anyway.
Sure.
Yeah.
I brought all this stuff over here the other day, and then I had to go out of town. So Rob got ahead of me and pretty much built the whole thing and said, I'll leave some things for us to do together. He did not do that. So we're just kind of got to go over what he did, why I had Rob do this, and some tips that Rob can give you as a 7-year pro. Some tips that Rob can give you as a 7-year pro to kind of up your game and whatever you've got going on this year, how to make your system better. Let's talk about what changed in this rack from the first version. So the first thing is, obviously, we've added another mix. We moved some stuff around. Because we have the extra space now, we're using this pass-through. We didn't need it, but we just have the space. Yeah. And there's no need of,
Yeah, and it's more serviceable. You could feed the cables in between two racks, especially the Sennheiser stuff, because it's not. It's slightly below a full rack space. You can feed it in between, but then you're having to solder the connectors on the outside essentially. Yeah. And if something needs to be swapped out, you have to unsolder something in order to fix it. Whereas this way, you can pull it out and push it through the panel and fix it without having to unrack anything or unsolder anything. These Switchcraft connectors are really robust. I haven't seen them break yet. They're a really, really nice design. But never say never, especially them being on the front. This can easily bang up against something and break. These boots are plastic. The actual connector is metal, but the boot that goes on the back is plastic.
BTPA sent those connectors with the split snake, so we're optimistic that they'll be great. And if they believe in them, then I guess we do too.
Yeah. And they mount them on the front of their DL32 and M32C racks. They end up being on the front. So if they trust them, I trust them. Those guys are awesome. So they build really nice rigs.
So other than that, on the front, we didn't really change much other things. Just doing some rearranging here. So now I guess let's turn around and talk about the back.
Yep.
So Rob, tell me what you did because I wasn't here.
I wired up all the RF, all the analog on the inside. I made sure my philosophy with building these is put all the cable to the sides, or as much of it as you can to the sides, so you can get your hands in there and move stuff around. And to not be too tight on the connections. You can cut them exactly the length and make them tight, but then if you need to rearrange the rack later, you're going to be out of slack, you're going to need to make new cables. And especially with something like this, for the style bands that would carry this kind of rig, you want to keep the cost down as much as possible, especially maintenance cost. So put all the power cables to the side. There's a right angle connector here on the PreSonus IEC jack, which I shoved basically in the side here and plugged into the Furman. I just mounted all the connectors to the panel, wired it all up. Pretty simple. There's not a lot going on the back side.
So I did make a mistake with this beautiful split snake that we bought from BTPA. Shout out BTPA. They do all kinds of great builds. If you need something custom built, like a panel or something like that, like something complex like this, that's who you use. They're the guys.
They're the guys, yeah.
But I made a mistake. I told them the wrong length of cable. You know how you're supposed to measure twice and cut once? Mm-hmm. I measured once in my head and didn't do anything else. So we had to do some adjusting. And basically what happened was I had Rob build some extensions of the cable.
For some of them, yeah.
Yeah, because in reality is if this would have been like an X32, we would have been fine because all the connections are on the back. And that's just a fault of mine.
Yeah. My philosophy with these sort of custom panels is to measure it twice and don't cut at all. So with these, just order them with the max length automatically. If you're handy with a soldering iron, order with the max length, and then once you get it and install it, then you can cut them and terminate the connectors.
Yeah.
That's going to be way better than actually, because we ordered 12 with one length, and then the other 4
really
really short, and they were way too short. I had to extend them by about 12 inches.
Well, those would have been fine, but the rack in my brain was upside down.
Right.
So at first when I brought it over here, I had the panel on upside down. And that wasn't going to work. Other things we did in the back, this time since I had Rob here and Rob's expertise, we installed a network switch.
Yes.
So the network switch is basically a Netgear network switch, which I'll pop on the screen. It allows all the Sennheiser units to talk to each other, and Rob's going to explain why we want to do that.
Yeah, so it can be any generic, unmanaged switch. They're not, specifically going to be set to a certain IP or anything. They're literally just going to see each other. And the reason is it makes your coordination a whole lot simpler, which we can talk about coordination later. But when you sync scan the packs to the transmitters, you're going to basically scan a list with the pack and then give one of the transmitters that list. Now, in order to give it to all of them, they need to be on a network together. So when you give it to the first one, it also gives it to the other 3 units or up to however many units you have. But it just makes your day a lot faster when it comes to coordinating the wireless. And I know that the majority of people using racks of this style don't really know anything about wireless, which is okay. It's not really your bag. That's all right. But you just need to make it as simple as possible so that basically anybody in your band can turn it on and do it. They just need to follow a list of instructions, essentially.
If you remember last time, we had to use a bunch of different orientation inverters to get power to the Furman from all the Sennheiser units. One thing that we did this time is we added the antenna combiner. There's a few reasons for that, not necessarily just the power, but as far as a rack this size, it's kind of crucial. I know a lot of you guys commented that you'd kill something in the rack and add a combiner. I saw those comments, completely agreed with you, and well, we did it. What are all of our benefits for a combiner other than just saving space and power through BNC?
Yeah, I mean, we had an antenna combiner in a previous version of the larger rack that we built years ago. Yeah,
Flash that on the screen right now, because that rack was sick.
Yeah, I saw pictures of that on my Instagram, I think. That was probably 7 years ago, maybe we built that, 8 years ago.
Rob and I were in a band a long time ago, and
several bands.
Yeah, we've been in several bands. Yeah. Actually, Rob was a part of Witsit at one point.
I was, a long time ago.
But Rob and I were in a country act a long time ago, and we built this mega rig, which is on the screen.
Yeah, it was like a 14 or 16 inch rack, rolling rack. And it did have an antenna combiner and an antenna splitter for the wireless guitar and wireless vocal as well.
What's crazy about that system is 80-ish% is right here now.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Yeah,
but a lot of the type, especially as far as the interface stuff, this wasn't a thing.
Right, we were using an X32 rack, and then we were also using an SD8 to expand it to 24 inputs. 24 inputs and 16 outputs. And then you also had a Kemper in the rack for your guitar. And it was a full one rack space for an interface as well, right? Because it was the A28X.
Yeah, and we were using a rack space for a tuner, for the wireless.
We were... was in the back, the main benefit of an antenna combiner is that you are taking a lot of different transmit sources and putting them into one. So whereas if you have 4 IEM systems and then you have a panel in the back with 4 of these guys, the little antenna that comes with the IEM system, these antennas, if they're close enough together, will interact with each other. In order to output the transmission from these, it takes some power. So a lot of different systems, you have different power ratings. I don't know what the Sennheiser actual specs are. They just call it low, standard, and high power. This is not a huge amount of power, but it's enough where antennas like this, if they're next to each other in a rack, are going to interact with each other. I remember the rack that we had built a long time ago. This is before I knew anything. This is well before I did pro audio. I remember in the back of that rack, we had these antennas coming straight off of the units, and it was sitting literally just like this in the back of the rack. Now, the problem is that with the current wireless spectrum space, I mean, we're looking at 470 megahertz to 608. That is the current standard, legal, usable space. Those waves are pretty large, and so they don't really go through objects very well. So we had it going through metal and wood, and so our range was we could probably get 10 feet away from the rack, and if we started to get dropouts, it was already noisy. On pretty bad RF days, it just didn't really work that well. And so, moving it to a panel in the back helps a lot, but with every BNC connection on a wireless unit, you lose 3 dB of gain. So in that case, you have the connection on the back of the panel, the connection on the panel on the back of the rack, and then the connection here. So that you end up losing 6 dB of gain in total with using these. You're still losing that when you're using a combiner and a paddle, but a combiner is going to add a little bit extra power to that. It's going to push through it. And the biggest thing is you're putting it all on one antenna, so they're not going to interact with each other. You greatly increase your range, and this can be placed, far away or up high. My recommendation with something like this is to get something like an LP claw or some sort of claw.
Which we've got an LP claw.
And just mount this kind of on the back like this, above the rack, so that, and as long as everybody who has a body pack on has line of sight of this antenna, you're going to be fine.
Yeah.
Now, as long as you did your coordination properly. That's first and foremost. But beyond that, as far as antenna placement goes, getting this in line of sight of everybody. But the other benefit with the Sennheiser combiner, which is not the case with all combiners, this is just kind of a side benefit, is that it does provide power to all the units via just DC through the BNC cables, which is awesome. A lot of other, even the Shure systems don't do that. Well, the Shure PSM 900s do, but the PSM 1000s, which is the standard, don't. Granted, they are a full rack unit for 2 mixes, and they require an IEC check. And there is power flow through on those.
And they're $30,000.
They're not $30,000.
They're $31,000.
No, but it's about $5,000 for a 2-channel system with that, with 2 body packs. Just depending on your supplier. I mean, it's more than this. I mean, these are like sub $1,000 for 1 unit, and the sound quality is really solid for what it is. And the reality that you have to face with this kind of rig is if you're expecting a studio quality stellar mix out of this without having a monitor engineer, it's just not going to happen. I mean, there's a reason the artists that can afford to pay people like me to mix monitors for them, because you've got a dedicated person spending all of their time working on that and managing the wireless and things like that. But for a small band that needs to travel with some sort of system so they're not using a house rig every day, because God knows that sucks for most people. You can get good house guys. You know, I've been a house guy before. I'm not saying I was good or not. Some days I was, some days I wasn't. But if you're not going to be able to travel with a monitor engineer, this is a really great way to do it. And the important thing to remember is that as long as you can hear what you need to hear and you can perform the show without dropouts, that's a win. Like, you don't necessarily need to have like the most perfect IEM mix. I see guys, you know, especially on the X32, they're just on their phone mixing their ears the whole show because you're like, I can't hear this, I can't hear this. Well, you know, as long as you can hear what you need to hear, you're fine. And there's some philosophies in mixing that you can get into, which is a whole other rabbit hole of, you know, especially with this kind of system, what are the best practices when changing your mix? Because it's not always turn things up, you know. A lot of times it's turn things down. But that's a whole other topic. But for this kind of rig, like, for not having an engineer, this is really, really solid. And you're going to have consistent shows. And your mix is going to stay the same every day, barring the, you know, variables of the room and, like, mic placement, things like that. It's going to be way closer than if you're with a new engineer and a new house rig every day. It's just so much simpler.
And the other thing about like these PreSonus rigs, the X32, the Midas rig, all of these things have built-in compressors and reverbs and EQs and stuff.
It's a full mixer.
Use that stuff. Like just adding some verb to your snare, your vocal, like that alone can change your, like, it can make your mix way more enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for people that don't really know mixing that well, the things to remember with this kind of rig is your high passes, your reverbs, and your pans. Don't worry about EQ that much. Don't worry about compression. It's like, because you can overdo compression really quick and make it difficult to play, or sing especially. But like, utilize panning. If you can do a stereo mix, you can get away with a lot by just high passing your inputs to where they need to be and panning them. Like that you can get a great mix with just that, as long as your inputs are good. Beyond that, it's just tone shaping pretty much.
And if you're new to ears and you need something like this, you're trying to figure out how to, you know, get all this together and utilize ears and don't hate them off the jump. One thing that was really helpful for me that I used to use a lot way back when, we used to use it too, now I don't care so much for it, but a audience mic.
Yeah.
You can throw, dude, I've seen people do 57s. I don't necessarily recommend that, but
I do it all the time.
I mean,
57s are great. I mean, it's really just some sort of audience capture so that you
get some room.
Yeah, you're getting some space. I recommend a stereo pair, but at the same time, you know, the issue becomes like setup and teardown time. You know, like even with my larger shows that I do, like, you know, my current rig is about, you know, 66, 68 inputs now. It's like, having audience mics is just one more thing you got to tear down. It's just kind of annoying. Yeah. But even if you could do like a, you know,
compare NT5s.
Yeah, NT5s or something really cheap. Like, I would even do like an XY pattern pencil condensers that you would attach to your vocal mic stand downstage center. Like that works just fine. Some way of giving yourself some ambient, some space. Otherwise, utilize reverb really heavily. My recommendation, and I know that people don't care for this opinion a lot of times, especially people like in Max this size, do not take an ear out. Don't ever take an ear out.
No.
You are...
No.
And even if the noise around you isn't super loud and you're like, well, I don't play with a live drummer, or like, you know, I'm not that close to the drummer. It's like, yeah, sure, it may not be, you know, ear damaging loud outside, but then you're going to turn up your pack automatically for your other ear, because this ear is hearing ambience in space, and it's hearing in 3D, whereas this ear is only hearing like a mono signal. So you're going to want to have that louder, and you're going to have damage in your ear that has your in-ear end than you are the one that doesn't. So I would say, as much as you can, keep both ears in. Even if it feels like you're underwater, you feel like you're suffocating, which is a lot of the worst people used to describe how they feel the first time using in-ears. It just takes some getting used to.
If you tend to do that, if you tend to take an ear out, you don't know a ton about compression, EQ, stuff like that. See if you know someone that does. Like, hire your friend to come out for a day. Be like, hey, come to our rehearsal. We're going to give you $100. Come to our rehearsal. Get our mix sounding right. In worst case, Rob and I will fly to wherever you need us to.
Yeah, I mean,
we love going on friend trips.
I do this.
So let me use that point to segue into the next thing, which we haven't talked about, which can be controversial as all get out. But I don't really care. You're watching my channel. Let's talk about actual in-ears. And if you've never bought custom molds before, we're going to drop Rob's instinct, because Rob's tried a lot of different ears. I've only tried one brand. Rob's going to drop 3 different kind of molds right now off the top of his head. He doesn't even know I'm asking him to do this. 3 different molds, kind of at 3 different price points for people that are getting molds for their first time. Go.
First, I'm going to say that molds aren't for everybody.
That's fair.
If you are starting out and don't want to spend a ton of money, you don't necessarily have to have molded custom.
A lot of us use 215s for years.
Yeah, and
there's no shame in that.
There's some newer stuff out there like KZ, which is an Amazon brand. They, we're talking about between $50 and like $300 depending on the model you get.
Yeah,
they sound really, really good for the price point, and they're generic style ears, but they're meant to be used as in-ear monitors, so they're a little more robust. They're not acrylic; they're usually made out of metal.
Yeah,
and they have a bunch of different tips with them that you can try. And the cables are a little more robust. So it's like there are options out there. If you are dead set on doing molds, which there's a lot of reasons for it, isolation is the biggest thing. Yeah. You're not going to get any outside noise, so you're going to hear more of your mix. And separation. Those are the 2 like main reasons to have it. If you're going to do
and they look cool.
Yeah, they look cool. And you get to design your fancy designs or whatever, which is a whole separate thing. But I think at 3 different price points, Ultimate Ears UE5s, I think, are going to be, which they just re-released from what I understand.
Yeah.
I think like $550.
Yeah.
Really,
we were
really
just talking
solid.
about them yesterday.
Yeah, really solid custom molds. It's the same design as the JH5, which that Jerry Harvey doesn't make anymore. That was my first set of ears.
That was my first set of ears.
2000.
A lot of us.
Yeah. 2012. It was a long time ago.
Mine still fit and work. As a backup, so
mine work, but they don't fit anymore. Which is really unfortunate. But they're really great sounding ears. I've taken smart traces of them. They are pretty flat. As far as an in-ear monitor goes, it's really solid. If you're a small act, that is probably your best bet.
100%.
If you can afford to, buy 2 sets. Have one as a spare. I would rather have 2 decent sounding sets than 1 really good sounding set. Period. Yeah. Especially with a rig like this, where it's like, yeah, you can spend, $2,300 on, JH Roxanne's or whatever. You're not really going to get the full potential of those ears. They sound amazing, but you're not going to get all of that out of this system. If you have a monitor engineer, then it's worth investing in better ears. But if you don't, and you're mixing it for yourself, don't get the most expensive thing. Instead, spend the money on 2 sets of like really decent ears. Get the same set. If you can all afford to, everybody in your band, all get the same set of ears, so that if one person is mixing for everybody else on a laptop, they're hearing the same thing. That's a big thing.
Especially if you have people sharing mixes.
Yes.
That helps a lot. And then even sometimes just like, if someone has UE5s and UE7s, like that's close. We're getting there. Like,
it doesn't need to be the exact same model, but close enough. I mean, and there are preferences, I will say, I don't think driver count matters. I've listened to,
Hot take.
Yeah.
Hot take.
Very hot take. It's about the quality of the driver, not the number of drivers.
Yeah, that's fair.
There are a lot of ears out now with 20 plus drivers in them. It's just not. I'm sure they sound great. My JH13s are 8 drivers. Yeah. They're great.
That's what I use consistently.
Yep.
That's
my JH Cenas are also 8 drivers. Those are dual low mid, dual high, dual high. So pretty balanced overall. But that doesn't necessarily matter. I mean, the JH5s are 2 driver, and I like the sound of them better than the Cenas. No offense to JH, that's just my one guy's opinion. I like the sound of my JH13s over my JH16s. I've got 6 sets of ears now, and I think my favorite, top 2 are my JH13s and my JH5s. That's just, and those are the 2 least expensive of the sets of ears that I own. So the amount of money you're spending on it doesn't matter, and the driver count doesn't matter as long as the drivers are good.
Number 1, we got the UE5s. Yeah, what's our like mid set? We're gonna spend like probably sub $2,000.
Sub $2,000. JH11s and JH13s are both really great sets of ears. Which one you choose is kind of a flavor thing. You can look online, on the product pages to see the balance of drivers, because drivers matter in that way of like Some are going to be, since drivers can be dedicated to certain frequency ranges, ears that have more low end drivers than high end drivers are going to be more bass heavy, and vice versa. Yeah. So if you're a bass player, you might want more low end drivers. If you're a guitar player, you want more mid range drivers. If you're a vocalist, you're going to want more high end drivers. Yeah. Generally, that's not always the case, but that is like pretty common. And so kind of just pick a set of ears that seem to work for the instrument you play. Yeah. If you happen to be in Nashville or somewhere where one of these manufacturers is, try to hit them up, see if you can get a demo of some sets, try some different ones out, and then make a purchase off of that. That is one thing about moles, is if you aren't near someone that can give you a demo, once you buy it, you can't return it because they're custom made for your ears. So it kind of is what it is. You just kind of have to know going in that once you buy it, there's no going back. Take some extra time, spend more time in the planning phase with that, and get some ears that work well for you. That's a good mid-range set, I'd say. If you're gonna spend more money, there's a company based out of Washington. They've got a shop here in Nashville as well, called Fur Audio. Some of the guys that were at 64 Audio for a long time and are now started their own company. Their ears are more on the expensive side, but they are really, really, really good. And the tech that's behind
they're doing crazy things.
There's a kinetic bass driver, which basically sits against your ear. It's not in the actual port of where the other drivers are coming out of. It's a separate driver that sits on your ear. It's larger, so you feel the bass. You feel it in stereo.
That's wild.
And you're feeling bass frequencies that are not necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily hear otherwise. You're feeling it instead because they're lower than what you're actually.
Which for a drummer or a bass player,
huge. And honestly, for me, mixing beautiful sounding ear. It's amazing. And all of their Frontier series has that kinetic bass driver. Yeah. My favorite of the Frontier series is the Radon 6, but that is a limited model. Other than that, the Xenon 6 is really awesome. And so are the Krypton 5s. Honestly, they're all really amazing. Yeah. But they also just put out a single driver ear that is called the E12. And it's both universal and custom options. And I believe it's around $1,800. Right?
That's not bad.
So for the price, and I haven't heard it yet, but from all of my friends that have tried it, they've said, you've got to listen to this thing. It's amazing. Yeah. So that's my recommendation for company is Fur Audio, and mainly for the customer service side. Yeah. They are really incredible. Really good turnaround time on repairs, really responsive.
And speaking of resources, this is the perfect time to plug that my friend Rob is starting his own YouTube channel, which I'm going to put down in the description below. I don't think he'll have any videos up by this time yet, but he's working hard and he's going to get if you like this style video, this is a little different than the one before, but very in-depth. That's kind of your...
Yeah, it's going to be primarily focused on monitor engineers and RF coordinators, and it's not going to be... the basics of things. I'm not going to teach you how to use gain structure or how to EQ a kick drum. That's just not... There are plenty of resources out there for that. Sure. I'm not the guy to do that. But if you want to check out some of the builds that I've done, you can find it there, or my Instagrams.
Sure.
Too, yeah.
I will definitely be watching Rob's videos.
A lot of it's going to be more on the more complicated side of things, like how to use how to program MIDI on a Digico console. That's one of my topics I'm going to talk about.
And the bigger you get, the bigger your act gets, the bigger we get, the more that stuff will start to matter to me.
Well, hopefully once that matters to you, you hire somebody to do it.
I'm hiring you, fool. We didn't do much building on this one. There's a lot of build on the last video. If you want to see stuff about soldering and stuff like that, go watch the last video. It's somewhere on the screen right now. Go watch that video. But we've done a lot of informational stuff on this video because there was a lot of questions last time. And one thing that we're going to show you how to do, because Rob's going to show me, because I always forget this, is Rob's going to show me how to sync these 4 boxes and get our RF ready to play at whatever show. If we were playing a show in Rob's garage right now, we're about to be RF ready for it.
So what we talked about before is when you turn on the system with the Sennheiser unit specifically, is they're automatically going to be transmitting RF when you turn on, which I can show that. So when you flip the system on, they are already transmitting now. So you don't want to do this in the middle of a festival day when somebody else is playing, or even if it's not a festival, because now you're transmitting RF. The way to bypass that is to turn this unit off. But the issue is because that's providing power to all the units, the power goes away, so you can't actually coordinate. So easiest way to do this is with them connected to a network switch. You can press the button here, go to easy setup, and where it says mute RF for connected devices, it's only going to show this screen if it's seeing another device on the network. You press that. That mutes the RF for all the devices. So that's where you want to start. So if you have to do this while somebody else is playing or during a show day, the easiest thing is power it on, immediately go to that screen so you can turn off your RF. And my recommendation is if you have to do that, then leave the antenna unplugged. So do not plug your antenna in until you're RF muted, because then you're going to be transmitting over other people. So now it's just waiting for a sync scan because we're in easy setup mode, which is the easiest way to coordinate these if you don't want to use external software. So basically the easiest way to get into it is when you turn your pack on, you press set, which is to enter your menu. You're going to scroll to easy setup. First thing you want to do is go to reset list. And you're going to want to do this every day because it does store the list over each other each day. Wait for that screen to go away. Go to scan new list. And we're going to let this scan through. And at this point, you just take your pack and you go stand out in the middle of the stage somewhere where it's going to pick up what the RF environment is actually going to be on your stage. Because if you do this side stage, it's not really going to be super helpful because it's only checking the RF environment side stage, not on the stage. All right, once it's done scanning a new list, it's going to show you what banks have what frequencies available. So we can see in bank 1, there's 12 free frequencies. In bank 2, there's 8 free, so on and so forth. Bank 1 has the most frequencies, so we're going to use that. We're going to select bank 1, and now it's in easy setup channel select mode. So we're going to sync it with the first unit. We're just going to let it do its thing. And you can see on all the screens, it popped up assign new frequency. We're going to leave unit 1 for now. We're going to assign a new frequency to each one. So we're just going to press in yes, yes, yes. And then once you do those 3, do the last one, store it. And now we're good to go.
Okay, cool. Well, that's the wrap. Rob, thank you so much for your help.
Of course.
If you've got any questions about how any of this works, because I'm sure there's stuff we haven't covered, put it in the comments. I'll do my best to answer any questions. You can follow Rob down below, 8-Track Audio. His YouTube channel will be coming soon. Definitely watch that for more in-depth, nerdy stuff. If you're looking to get rigs built, Rob is your best bet. I can do simple rigs, but if you want something legit and pro, Rob's who built this one for me. So Rob is the guy to do. Rob's available through his Instagram.
Yep,
yeah.
Instagram. If you're in Nashville or close to Nashville, that's obviously the easiest. But I do shipped stuff as well.
You can hit him up through Christian Mingle,
but mostly
Napster,
mostly pedal boards, playback, IEM systems, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If you want just custom cables made, I just make custom cables.
Yeah.
Funny,
And Rob's gonna help me. We've got another video that I think we're gonna do, hopefully in the next few months. That I think you guys will really enjoy as well. But other than that, subscribe to this channel because I want to be able to buy more gear. So if you subscribe, I get to buy more gear. Other than that, thanks for watching. And if you need me, I'll call you.